Yes, so we can now proceed with our questionnaire, and I'll ask another question. If we
Yeah,
continue to trot down the yes, if we continue to trot down the paths that we're currently going right now, communalism, the rising inequality and alienation of minorities and various groups in our country, where do you think we are going to end up?
well, it's a very kind of a situation which is, I would call a crisis for our society and state because of the rising levels of inequality. And these rising levels of inequality again can be attributed to neoliberal policies followed by the regime and crony capitalism. Okay, so the problem is that the political regime prevailing in India now is ignoring such problems, which have assumed the proportion of a crisis. Okay, and the crony capitalism, which is upheld by the political regime, and there are many crony capitalists which are appropriating the business and enterprises. That's a cause of concern, for our country, because that is one of the key factors in monopolization of means of production. Because in our directive principles of state policy, there is a article which says that the state should endeavor to decentralize the means of production so that resources are not controlled by few people. Okay, so this is going to cause a massive problem for our people, for our society, for our state. That is why there are demonstrations, the protests, and they face coercive action. People engaged in protests, they face coercive action. And the other point, you said that minorities are feeling insecure, and that's because of the majoritarianism and polarization process, which are being fostered very in a calculated manner by the political regime, for genocide of Muslims and minorities by some leaders owing allegiance to a particular faith. And such calls are also issued by the leaders and legislators of the ruling party at the center, and the absence of any action by the political regime against such forces, that's causing people professing different faiths, which is not in conformity with the faith of the majority people. And there are hate speeches, fake narratives being spread around them. So all such things are, what do you call, deepening the crisis for our state and society, which is not good at all. It is putting at stake the very unity and integrity of India. I mean, call for not only genocide of minorities or Muslims, but also call for comprehensive social and economic boycott of their businesses, their livelihoods, their economic activities, which is very a cause of serious concern. In spite of the several judgments of the Supreme Court on hate speeches, the political regimes are not taking an action against that. So Supreme Court, in one of its judgments, with reference to Maharashtra, he said, has the state become important to deal with hate speeches? So what does it mean? In spite of the intervention by our apex court, the highest judiciary, no action is being taken, and people are engaged in spreading hate speeches, particularly to target a section of our population based on the, really a cause of concern, serious cause of concern. In fact, India has been placed as a country of concern as far as religious freedom is taken into account.
Yes.
So, this is a very, very worrisome development. that needs to be addressed by the political regimes who, are there in the office by taking oaths under the Constitution of India, which upholds the equality of all, which upholds the coexistence of faiths and celebrates our plurality and multi-religious society.
Yes.
So these are the things which need to be, you know, they need to be taken into account when analyzing the present crisis, which is frankly speaking getting deeper and
And
deeper.
coming to a
Yeah.
crisis that you're talking about, India, Indian government especially ignored the 3 months civil war that was going on in an Indian state, Manipur, and there were cases of Chinese weapons found in the state. And we have seen that in recent years, China has begun to expand its sphere of influence in the Indian subcontinent. You see, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Maldives, all these. India is slowly isolating itself on the international stage. What are you think this is leading
Yeah,
to?
this is another matter which causes a lot of agitation and causes a lot of anxiety in the minds of people, public, and of course even judiciary. See, for instance, you refer to Manipur. After the there's the unfortunate, very extremely shattering incident involving parading of two ladies who were without clothes. The Supreme Court took suo motu cognizance of the matter and said that if the government of India has failed to deal with it, then the judiciary will intervene. And eventually it intervened. And while intervening, it made a remark that the state machinery has completely failed. So it's an indictment of the state of our republic, the government of our republic, which has the mandate to protect life, and the violence is continuing unabated, and constitutional provisions have not been invoked. See, for instance, there are demands that the government should be dismissed and president's rule should be imposed. But nothing of that sort has happened in spite of the observation of the Supreme Court that the state machinery has completely failed. And it has failed to such an extent that in an FIR could not be registered. So I mean, these are the observations of the Supreme Court that the state machinery has failed. State machinery failed for what? Failed for protecting the constitutional order of governance in the state. So it's a really, a serious indictment. The observations of the Supreme Court constitute a serious indictment on the regime which is supposed to uphold the rule of law. And then you refer to, Chinese weapons which are now traced in Manipur. That's certainly, after all, certainly a matter of grave concern, because after all, Manipur is a bordering state. It has a border with Myanmar and I think other countries or whatever. It's a border. It's a state which is there right on the sensitive border of India in the northeastern part, and therefore, if any problem comes up or any crisis comes up, which now seems to be beyond the control of the government of India, government which is there in the state, then the foreign powers obviously would take advantage of it. And those foreign powers, be it China, be it Myanmar, they can certainly take advantage of it. So if we cannot address the problems there, that would obviously represent the failure of our foreign policy, a failure of our diplomatic orientation. And that failure is now reflected in what is happening in Maldives, or for that matter, Sri Lanka. So I think for our foreign policy, which is based on national consensus, is now is certainly not up to the expectation of that consensus. And therefore, India, with its huge size, economic power, strength, and of course our technological and scientific accomplishments, have a salutary influence on our neighboring areas, and now also even beyond the neighboring areas. I mean, look at Canada, US. US is accusing India of deploying
Assassinating a political leader in Canada.
yeah, some kind of charges are there. And I think the Indian state or the political regime, operating the Indian state now is rather in a embarrassing situation. Same is the case with Canada. I mean, Canada and US, they are developed countries and very big states, and we have to have very good relations with them. So if they are raising fingers, so this means there's some problem as far as our foreign policy is concerned. And so it's a very worrisome development at the global level as far as our foreign policy is concerned.
Yes. Now we have achieved a lot from this interview. I would like to ask one last question. What message would you like to give to the audience that is watching this video?
Well, my message, or for that matter, a message which should be central to all of us. I mean, all the citizens of our country, should be that the crisis that we are confronting today in terms of lack of scrutiny of the political regime, or in terms of the failure of the state machinery in Manipur, and the problems that we are confronting in the foreign policy front, need to be addressed by the leadership, which should take views from the opposition, from the media, because remarkable editorials are appearing on such issues. And above all, the political regime must put a full stop to the majoritarian and polarizing process that is going on, and which certainly divides people in the name of faith, in the name of so many other attributes. So, I mean, the manner in which the governors function in opposition ruled states, and Supreme Court clearly stated that several governors are acting as if they are elected governors, and they are acting in a manner as if they have a alternative center of power. But the point is that there is an elected government which is running the state affairs of the state based on the mandate of the people. Power flows from the people. So we need to adhere to the constitutional scheme of governance. If you stick to the constitutional scheme of governance, then most of the problems would be, addressed very, very effectively. And it requires statesmanship to do so. So our political leaders, they, apart from occupying high constitutional posts, they need to also be like statesmen. And Ambedkar said that just because a political party has a majority, that is not enough to govern a country. Among others, what is required to govern a country is that of great wisdom, and that wisdom cannot come from majority support. The wisdom would come from rather a broad liberal approach to the issues, and that broad and liberal approach should be there through a process of reconciliation, accommodation, and democratic process, which would obviously mean inclusion of diverse opposing points. So that is the approach which is enshrined in the Constitution, and that needs to be followed, to face the challenges that we are confronting.
Well said, sir. Thank you so much, sir. It is an honor to speak with you again.
Okay,
and I'm
thank
very
you so much.
thankful that you allowed for a third interview. No one agrees to this many requests, and I'm very much honored to speak with you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hope this is not the last time we see.
No, certainly we'll catch up. Okay.